As a child, the 60s was going on, and people did not warn me very clearly about what was happening. Some probably didn't really understand what was happening. In the 80s, John Stockwell started coming around to laugh about MK Ultra at universities around the country. But that was the first I'd heard about the weapons deal in the inner sanctum of the rock industry. So when I was battered by my peers and made to look like a very unworthy and untrustworthy son by my alcoholic mother, who was in the worst of her temper tantrums, I didn't think I was very important to anyone. When I would occasionally meet somebody like Mr. Rogers, he ignored me completely or made faces at me like Frank Zappa did. We have a society where there's a sort of cultural trust in Kennedy's assassins that has been worked out by the movie directors of cinema, takeover of media, the peculiar institution we call media these days. It's been thrown down by the celebrity superstate. And when I was very happy to interview Peter Gabriel and meet Robert Fripp, I tried to be forthcoming about that fact with the city rivals and peers. You know, this is an opportunity to think of the best in yourself for once. Well, we live in a society that is somewhat disgraceful in that bullies run the show and they make alliances that that they allow and allow them to do anything they want except keep their word. It's expedient those alliances fall apart at the first available opportunity. None, they might say it's thick and thin, but hardly true. And a good example of the problem can be seen in the partnership of Vince Irini and Martin Sheen that came to bat for the old blood system of Pittsburgh and the alliances of Seattle when I started sending letters back and forth to the British rock stars who were particularly interesting to me as artists. And I was trying to keep up with the inner movements of my psyche, where I was at as a frame of reference. I hadn't yet seen the papers talking about me as a study in guerrilla theater impinging on the persona's experience, as Pope Carl put it. In other words, I didn't realize that the interiors was the target of Woody Allen's super production, his idea of taking the psyche of a tormented child and turning it into a Zelig that they could scribble whatever they wanted on. And Irene was selling hostile slanders about me right and left. And if you see the movie El Norte, you realize that people who struggle very hard, the Muslim community, uses, I was about to say uses, the idea of martyrdom as service to a higher cause as a way of, you can either say reaching out to people's sincerity or pushing them to the front of convenient choice. It sounds like the Russian Orthodox Church is the same way. They get compromised on somebody and they go make amends to the Godfather in the holy heavens on the front. But be that as it may, they still have a better record of keeping their word. Now, Irene and Sheen are two poles apart, but they're in a formation in Pittsburgh. Sheen is the master of instant success. You achieve recognition. You're one overnight sensation, I guess is what it's called. Or you don't deserve to be praised by the Pope until your life is at an end and all your good works have been surrendered. And to me, this is too piteous and too extreme. I believe it leads to situations like the ones in Gaza and Sudan. I believe that it's too extreme for a Pittsburgh public school student to be pushed notoriously by Mel Gibson and Donald Trump in secret inner sanctums to either rise to the weird occasion of a script from Israel or be defeated in all good works pertaining to public schools. It's sadistic. And partly it was a lesson in important people. They put Lenin's death on out with as a timer and launched the drug craze simultaneously with that because they wanted to interrogate the idealist who was caught up in the 60s, in the shadow of the 60s, who was tortured and dragged through ideological double cross by monsters from the pornographic industry. In the movie they call reality, and I'll say that again, in the movie that they call reality, meaning these movie directors have taken over our media. Lenin's contract was fulfilled and they evacuated him. An 11th hour drama genre from Ian Fleming and Alan Dulles. Now, that's enough to explain the savagery that came visited on me by Mel Gibson and Peter Gabriel and Martin Scorsese, because for one thing, Gibson and Scorsese were obsessing over the crucifixion of the star of Last Temptation. They were obsessing over that, and the script was about AIDS, so it was logical to say, we want to poison you, give you Parkinson's, torture you, make you deaf, attack you in the eyes, all the various sinister crimes they committed, to see if you're really willing to be martyred on the cross of saying Reagan knew. It's pretty appalling that something like that would come out of the British royalty. And what I have to offer, to some extent, is a take on the subject of the almighty double cross. After you look at the presentation archives that show Reagan's The Killers was clocked in his operative film, and thus he was involved in killing JFK, and of course my being in D.C. when he claims he was shot with his attorneys from Pentagon Disney. You see then the arrangement to explain the murder of JFK. This scares me. I'm really very frightened by this stuff. JFK was killed over Hiroshima. It's on the issue of Hiroshima that they turned the wheel from JFK to JMRC, James McRyland Creary, because my father was off the coast of northern Japan when the bomb, through no fault of his own, was dropped. He never celebrated it. He was rather saddened by the whole thing. But they made me a target of Yoko Ono way back in the 40s. It was just give me a sacrifice, give me one small child to crucify his little boy, which is what they called the atomic bomb. And what we begin to see is how Mel Gibson and Yoko Ono turned the AIDS attack into a cool genocide. The archives I'm working on show that they use the mirror system, where reality is a mirror of Hollywood, and Hollywood is a mirror of reality, that was developed by Hitler, Germany, Nazi cinema. People like Ingrid Bergman from Sweden, and Joseph Goebbels, Wolfgang Stout. These were the people who D.W. Griffith had been had been holding court with from the early ages of the great dictators in places like Fayoum, with the Nuncio, Marinetti, and Mussolini. It's Mussolini's son, who was a Hollywood hotshot. And Alan Dulles put Cecil B. DeMille in charge of Radio Free Europe. And he was a partner of Ian Fleming. All of these things were worked out by Ian Fleming and Cecil Rhodes, who made clear that he was working on a plot to take over America for the British, to reclaim America, to get us back to where we once belonged. To put it in Senator McCartney's talking sideways. So they targeted James's little boy, and they changed the Carnegie Mellon University, which had a constituent from the Japanese Marshall Society, who were very casual about their role in World War II, made more casual by the tragedy of the atomic bomb and how that plays in gangs like Rusted Root. The American Indian brats who went along with Yoko Ono in their attack on James, this little boy. And they were popular among the Japanese prima donnas like Midori Goto, was subvert the dominant paradigm. Now, Mel Gibson's father was out in Westmoreland County with Reagan's Federal Emergency Management Agency group, whose Israeli attorneys had me in D.C. for the double cross of James Brady. So, and they snap their fingers and get a Jewish girls choir to sing about annihilating Gaza, and this angelic choir gets slaps on the behind by Cory Booker. Meanwhile, they're torturing me and refusing to allow me to go to school. And the claim that there could have been a turning point for the victims is not very logical. Rather than a turning point, Seattle gays brag of building momentum for the stormtroopers now stormtrooping Gaza. So there was never any doubt that the records came from Neva Pornographic with intent to be used by Mel Gibson to promote the attackers in a barbaric representation of Pittsburgh's propensity for guerrilla theater. And they were helping Shulman rip off the museums and running off with my stamp collection and tabulating everything I ever did in confusion to make a roster, a Taliban, a list for Rick Santorum to justify ignoring that Rod Curry's son was kidnapped and tortured by a brutal gang of pedophiles. So they have, the Magic Christian from 1969 shows production semiotics that are repeated in Diva from 1981, which referenced me repeatedly, referenced the script repeatedly, and yet was too soon for AIDS. But Will Zell was talking about AIDS. The scheme to transform the human race by injecting the blood was before AIDS happened too. So this is all Wolfgang's mirror almost. Now Langer said, I'm not sorry for anything I did, only that it had to be you. You see, I was born 6 months from Hitler's birthday. So they turned the dominant paradigm. Miles Kirshner used to call me a nice blonde boy. And they have a black woman in the mirror. And she says, I'm the lucky one, which is turns around as you are the lucky one. You are the one we're going to burn as a symbol of our contempt for Pittsburgh public school children. Now, Tim Stevens is the leader of the NAACP, and he will use any excuse to get rid of a white person. So he didn't need Whale's Tail, Andrea Swimmer, barking up with Jaime Carbonell the carrot tape that they extruded with the help of Brecker. He would have used anything he could think of. Jimmy was smoking pot with Miles Kirshner, he would say. Therefore, he could have saved John Lennon. And Cory Booker would be patting every rabbi donating to Tim Stevens on the behind. And there's something called fluxus in the dialogue, which is in things like Casablanca with Ingrid Bergman, who starred as Martha Gellhorn in For Whom the Bell Tolls. And in Casablanca, for her, your sake, I let her pretend. And that's sort of Errol Flynn's discreet whisper to Adolf. For your sake, we're going to let John Kennedy pretend he was president of the United States. But Tim Stevens' big promotion, he got a lot of guerrilla theater going from country theater. It was that I didn't like hurting people. I didn't fight back as a child. That's the big tabula rasa of American diplomacy. They justified murdering children in Gaza because they can't fight back. What do you do with somebody who won't fight back? They say, well, see, he's weak and ineffectual, so let's just lie about him, lie to him, manipulate him sexually, make parasitic films of him, deafen him, give him Parkinson's, and send in Mel Gibson and say, well, we're the only ones who could get the message out about the evidence you found about Reagan. So give us your word that you'll never try to tell the truth and protect the legacy of the United States from Kennedy's killers. Or we'll see what's what when Yoko Ono comes out of her seance